Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a 45-minute panel on building the regenerative economy. Please welcome to the stage the moderator, Lena Hierzi. We have John Allison, we have Marc Johnson, and Gabriela Chang. Put your hands together, everybody.
Hang on, sorry, I have to give the mic away.
Okay, hi everybody. Very, very excited to be here today. We will talk about building the regenerative economy, and I am very, very excited. It's like not really great microphone quality. I don't know. Hi. Okay, this is better. Hi, great. And I'm very excited about my incredible panel. We have people with like years of experience in the refi sector. And so without further ado, I would like to ask you to introduce you very quickly and the projects you're working on. And
Is the mic coming through? All right, cool. Yeah. Hey, everybody. John Allison here, source steward at Refi DAO. I found myself at the intersection of climate and crypto kind of by accident. I've been an entrepreneur for about 16 years, built a circular economy startup, built software for governments in the US, and was really looking for a greater point of leverage to enact change in a way that people could actually verify. Greenwashing is so rampant. People are so disillusioned with these promises of a better world. Okay. And yeah, it was really interesting. Hello. Cool. Yeah, mic trouble's in here. So anyway, that's me. We'll dive into it more. John Allison, Refi DAO. Marc, bro, hope the mic works better for you, homie.
Check, check. Ooh. Thank you. Marc Johnson. I'm an environmental solutions architect for Protocol Labs, and I work specifically on an initiative called Filecoin Green. Protocol Labs, we build protocols and solutions specifically around like the data layer, and we really build most of those based on a core primitive called content addressing data. So some of our protocols and products, if you're not familiar, are IPFS and Filecoin and NFT storage and things like that. Within our work at Filecoin Green, we really have a dual objective of making the Filecoin network verifiably sustainable and also to build tools to better monitor and mitigate environmental impacts, not just within our own network, but across other networks and even other areas of economic activity. So super excited to dive into all of this.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be again with all of you. I'm Gabriela Chang, co-founder of EPAB, a financial inclusion protocol for unbanked smallholder farmers, alive since 2018. I work for the Secretary of Economic Development in Mexico. I live now in Spain. And I was also an organic coffee producer, so we are quite aware of the problem on ground. And because I know that problem and also the problem of lack of knowledge about Web3, I work a lot also for spreading word about the use of this amazing technology for real stuff, for real world. So I'm very happy to see that there's a growing community regarding refi space and business with purpose. So thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for being here, all of you. Very excited. So I think my first question is going to be related to how we, building the blockchain ecosystem. We have like this issue of like understanding what do we have to like create completely new, where can we take kind of existing blocks from systems that work, and my question like related to refi and especially to communities, my question would be, Gabriela, which paths do you think we can take and which paths we definitely have to rethink in a new way to like kind of avoid making the same mistakes we have in Web 2?
Yeah, thank you. I would start pointing out what I think are the worst mistakes made in Web 2. For started, we have a global system that systematically excludes 1 out of every 4 human beings. According to the World Bank, a quarter of the world population is excluded, but not only from the financial system, from the carbon credits and for the certification system, and mostly everything that needs internet to connect, that needs digitalization. Let's think the people who has not access, the smallholder farmers, 1.2 billion, is the same number of the people without access to electric grid. So it's the same people. So exclusion, I would say, is the main problem. So in order to avoid repeating this problem, I ask all of you, builders, supporters, users, every time you think about a solution, embed into it inclusion, but not from the European point of view that inclusion is including women and minorities, but keep in mind that a quarter of the world is excluded from everything. So let's try to think about this. And even when they don't have connectivity, we have proof that it is possible to benefit for them to benefit from blockchain, even if they don't connect to a wallet. It will come in 1 year or two. But you can design the proper incentives to make the actors of the system that are in contact with the farmers to reach them. So it's about designing protocols and designing incentives loops to make things happen, even if not directly interacting with the technology.
Okay, amazing response. And also, yeah, I think it's so important that we understand we have to bring everybody to the table, that we just don't look from outside and be like, oh, you're a minority, you're like from the global south. But everybody has to sit on the table and be part of that discussion to avoid these issues.
I hate the use of global north and global south. It's another form of discrimination, like the poor there, but Australia is there and it's not poor. So it's not a very precise, but it's, again, an euphemism to talk about this separation. Why don't we find a narrative that includes all the planet? Stop separating the planet because it's one bucket for all.
And also systems might have to be differently adapted to different regions, so we cannot just like decide for everybody. So yeah, great response. And Marc, like, you have like so much experience working in climate tech, but also in Web3. And what have been like the biggest misconceptions people assumed, like, oh, this is going to work, and then it did not, or like or what worked really well of like actually like transferring this into Web3?
Yeah, that's a great question. And very much, my answer will very much align with yours, in that, in my experience and in our experience within Filecoin Green, so many projects and or people come to the space and try to apply techniques maybe carried over from older types of systems or industries and things like that, and they think that Web3 and Refi becomes a panacea that solves all problems. You just tokenize something and it's automatically 1,000 times better. And obviously, I think we all know from many trials and tribulations that that is not true. And so we need to recognize that as we're trying to really foster this global community of regenerative practices and embed it into our economic systems in a very local and community sense, but also from a global and macro perspective, that even though we have these incredibly innovative set of technologies in the Web3 space, we still need to apply them in the right manner and make sure that the use case that we're using it for actually solves a real world problem and brings impact to those local communities.
Great. Yeah, I think it's also kind of covering what Gabriela said, like having macro systems and then combining this with micro systems, and that's what blockchain makes possible, right? So it's really cool. So John, oh, I just realized.
Hey,
Hi.
I'm here still.
No, I think what my question to you would be just like, now that we got this amazing intro, but there's like, can you, for everybody here, just give us just a very quick intro, like where are we in Refi right now? Like what's the current state of like what still needs to be done, or like what, because you are such a, like, have such a broad knowledge and you're So can you give us a quick intro for it?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a few waves of this movement. You know, you have the Gregory Landua, Dr. Sean Conway of ICSO Region Network. They kind of laid the foundations, taking from many pioneers of regenerative economics. They built really visionary software systems, but were far ahead of their time. And they didn't really hit scalability, and there wasn't a lot of attention there. And then comes around DeFi summer, all of these new money Legos are around, Olympus DAO, protocol-owned liquidity, and then Klima DAO and Toucan prepare to launch this money-making scheme on top of carbon credits, which allow people to engage with this old world system that has existing value in the market. And there was this explosion of innovation. We saw 5% of the entire world supply of carbon credits come on chain in a matter of months. $1 billion market cap in under 2 weeks. 60,000 investors coming into this promise of making money while doing good for the planet. And what we realized was actually this technology was far more powerful than we thought. I know the guys at Toucan thought they would do maybe 1 million tons in a year, and they did 24. This potential, this mechanism design is so incredibly powerful. And so what began as maybe a dozen or 2 dozen projects in Refi suddenly became hundreds. And now there's a database at refidao.com that we share with other partners like Climate Collective with over 650 experiments looking at using Web3 to make an impact for the planet. But I don't think really, other than I'd say Ethic Hub, maybe Impact Market, I think Giveth, Gitcoin, there's a handful of people who are really out there in the world providing volume, providing capital flow as a consistent mechanism. Because now after Vera has pulled the bridge and there's no more incoming supply, there's this kind of stagnant moment in Refi where we have to choose, do we piggyback on the legacy world and all of these old institutions, these old financial instruments, or do we really go beyond and to recreate the entire value exchange system? And I think that's what's happening now, and I'm really excited to see projects like Open Forest Protocol, on Near, deploying tech that's really quite frankly simple, but actually allowing people to issue forestry credits natively on-chain all over the world, and to begin to see corporate adoption for this new type of asset that has no link to centralized intermediaries at all. And I think we have this lull during the bear, this opportunity to build genuine, deeply rooted, thoroughly considered value mechanisms that actually work at scale. And so I mean no discredit to this initial wave. I'm only here because of this promise that Toucan and Klima DAO provided of doing good while making money. But I think this invitation is to really go deeper and to truly understand what are our value systems and how can we build technology that actually allows people on the planet to live together in harmony.
Okay, yeah,
Just one point, because I very much agree with that. Unfortunately, a lot of projects in the Refi space are focused around the speculative financialization of environmental assets. Refi is so much broader than that, and regenerative economics is a whole school of thoughts and ideologies and systems where carbon credits and environmental assets are a tiny little sliver, and they're a tiny little sliver because that's all they need to be. Right? At the end of the day, a carbon credit is just an economic band-aid that does not solve the underlying problem of decarbonization. So we need to make sure that we're taking that into account and don't put Refi in a corner of just like carbon credits. Just rant over.
Agree. Also, just John. I think Toucan did not promise money for doing good. Like Toucan builds infrastructure and they like built the infrastructure for this hype. So just to clarify that. Also, Toucan is really working on providing new supply very soon. So
thank you for clarifying.
Promise man. So my next question is, how can we foster collaboration in Web3, and where do you already see it, and where are you still missing it? And then I would go directly first to John again, because you built Refi DAO, and you have you yesterday told me 19 subnodes, and you organize so many events. And my question is who of these stakeholders, of the whole broad, first of all, maybe who are these stakeholders? Who do you still find missing in your meetups, and what are the main conversations you see happening in these meetups?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts there. How do you foster collaboration? And so our invitation to every founder that comes into Refi is to really find your unique contribution. the gift that you are able to give, the product you are able to build that only you can really do based on who you are and your experience, and to focus on doing less, but doing it better. And I think the idea of contributing a single money Lego to this incredible ecosystem with the intention that other people can build on top, that you don't have to do it all, is really the magic of this Web3 system that we have. And I think, people often try and do way too much, and they try and cover too many parts of the value system. And it really inhibits collaboration, because if you're covering everything from asset origination to the marketplace and to the derivatives, like, where can people build on top of you? How are the network effects actually created? And so I think, fostering this Web3 native mindset of building composable products is really important. And accepting that you can't do it all, and you need an entire network to succeed. I think on the other side, there's a lot of actors missing in Refi. And that's why we're gathering locally every month in 19 cities around the world. Because we're trying to talk to elected officials, corporate sustainability officers, NGO executives. And in Lisbon in particular, most of the people that come are actually not from Web3. They're concerned about homelessness, social inequality, environmental degradation, and they're curious about a community that is building cool tech to solve these problems in a meaningful way. And I think doubling down on this really deep sense of belonging that Web3 fosters has incredible potential, and to just continue to invite people from outside this bubble to help us make something meaningful for generations to come.
Okay, amazing, really cool. So Gabriela, how do you feel like Web3 has an impact on communities? Like, do you feel like they are getting more access, like farmers directly to stakeholders, or where do you feel there's something so missing? I feel like you already hinted at something, but
before answering that, can I catch some of what John said, because I think it is related. You said about how we foster collaboration. Collaboration means also reaching the end users on both sides. It is quite often said that Web3 is for collaborators, when Web2 was for competitors. So it's basically made to collaborate, and this composability, that we don't have to do everything, or we do a very basic everything, and then others come and complete it better. So I think it's very important. It's a concept I heard from Joe Brewer. It's radical inclusion, because we are among people that think the same than us. We are very comfortable here, but this is quite endogamic. The reality is that we are a niche within a niche. So we need to spread the word of it, out of it. And to reach, I always insist on that, the capital assigned for development in the world is way many times over the whole amount of resources that are in Web3. It's a lot. And it's a capital that is waiting there to be landed in the ground, because they cannot without intermediaries. So this technology enables the possibility to make a drill on that barrier that has been separating that part of the world. So I think it's very important to keep in mind that collaboration is key, and building communities also. And then connecting with the second question of how to connect with the farmers. Trust. Everything is about trust. EPAB relates on circles of trust and theory of game based on blockchain. So you need to reach them in a manner that they don't feel threatened or betrayed again. Because historically there has been a extraction history, and why these white people, well, I'm not that white, so it helps, but how these people is coming in a colonialistic way. No, it's not. We are partners. We are inviting you to be impact investors and support the activities that these farmers are already doing. And they produce 1/3 of the world's food and 80% of the coffee. That's the second commodity after oil. It's a huge amount of value that is not recognized for the producers. So I think it's very important to reach them with honesty and saying, we're a small business. We are not having this huge capital behind us. We are not governments. We are not foundations or NGOs. What we are doing is convincing honest and hardworking people like you in the other side of the world to support you, to invest in you, to give you collateral so others can invest in you. And they think like, nobody has told that before, so we may try. And little by little, we start growing. Then we need to make it exponential, because little by little is too slow for the timing that is clicking down. So I think spreading word, making this hyper connection, this radical inclusivity will also make the users, the end users, not just the farmers without connectivity, but also the end users like any of you and any citizen in the world to be connected with this technology, because we need to urgently spread word about its potential to solve real world problems.
Okay, amazing. Just because you were talking about that, like, how do you think we can scale that? Because when you say, like, let's do it so fast, how is that scalable, like this community work on the ground?
Well, I would like to say that's like a recipe that I can improvise here for every one of you, but it's not. There's been a lot of work behind our tokenomics, for example, but the key in our case for scaling, it's figuring out what's the factor of extrapolation. In our case, we've been working very hard, like turning pebbles, how they, in Spanish they say, breaking stones, until we made it, no? So for 5 years, we've been hard working with retail users, and finally, we make a connection with Heifer International, a huge NGO focused on reducing poverty, and they are working with thousands of farmers. So they are this filter of trust, and we will onboard massively this farmers community. So once Heifer is inside, we set a precedent. So then some other very traditional institutions will come over also. So I think every project needs to find first a way to prove they're working, they are needed to give results, and then to scale those results based, again, upon collaboration with the right partners. We are also partnering with Token Protocol for doing, with a lot of projects. I won't start saying names because I'm sure I'm going to left out some, but I think this is a very collaborative space, and has to be like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very beautiful to see how the protocols and projects work together. And as John said, like, I think that's kind of also one of the success of stories of like Token, that they really focus on the tokenization, and KlimaDAO did the whole liquidity and like the whole other part that was very important. So Marc, from like the perspective, because now we heard the perspective from communities, how like this collaboration changed, or like what kind of impact it had, but like from the perspective of big institution, how does having access, like direct access to the local communities, or like kind of like taking out middlemen, has an impact, or like how does that changed?
Yeah, totally. Great question. I like thinking about it from the community, local level, and from the macro level, as we've talked about before, and from these big institutions. I mentioned earlier, right, our core network is the Filecoin network. It's the world's largest decentralized data storage network. It's launched in like September, October of 2020. And since then, it has grown to about 21.5 exabytes of quality adjusted storage capacity, like 13 exabytes of raw byte storage capacity. To put that in perspective, that's like 85,000 copies of all of Wikipedia, or like 10% of Amazon Web Service. It is a massive, massive globally distributed storage network made up of more than 4,000 independent, what we call storage providers, or nodes in the network that are contributing storage space to the network and storing data on behalf of clients. We have data sets from NASA, from NOAA, from CERN, from UN systems, from major academic institutions. The black hole images from UC Berkeley are on Filecoin, which is one of my favorite data sets. And also, we have piloted some projects with large municipalities around the world. One that comes to mind is New York City's public data sets are all on Filecoin. And what that enables, by content addressing that data, putting it on an open data platform, and crucially, once again, having it content addressed, it allows for people to create end-to-end audit trails of state changes made to that data over time. So as more of this public data from New York City or any other city in the world comes onto the network, and there's newer versions of it, and since it's all content addressed, you can see how that data is changing over time, which helps policymakers and informed citizens to make more informed decisions about the state of these systems within their locale, right? So for instance, with New York City, we've worked with local policymakers to help them craft new policy objectives based on those state changes made to data. And that's where I see so much promise in working from the data layer and using these innovative technologies that Web3 enables for us to, foster some of these regenerative practices and create new forms of economic systems that allow for us to really replenish and renew our forms of economic activity.
Okay, so like the connection is data for you between everybody. I mean,
data is the lifeblood, plain and simple.
Yeah, and just sharing this data and everybody having access to it. I agree. So the next question would be about like accessibility and onboarding. I think we're not going to talk about UI and UX because we all know that needs improvement and it will get improvement. So it's more about the refi space. The refi space is one of the most diverse spaces in Web3, we assume or we think or we know. But I think we all know it still has huge issues. And I think, so my first question would go straight to you. Gabriela, like, where do you see the biggest issues in creating a decentralized, regenerative economy when we don't have all of the actors at the table, and how are we going to change that?
I think by creating examples that are easy to understand. As I was saying, the protocol before us that we're talking here, EXA, guys, it's amazing what they are doing, but it's quite complex to communicate. It's very relevant. So all the projects we are doing are very, very relevant. I think they are game changers. The refi space is especially disruptive because the problems we had for many decades, even centuries, won't be solved with the same methodologies. You know this sentence, you want something different, don't do the same, because you will get the same results. Okay, so I think in that sense, the projects are very disruptive, but because of that, are difficult to explain because people want a parallel. Well, what are you doing? It's like nothing else similar. So I think the narrative needs to be improved. Quite often we are very in love with the technology and we start talking like, I don't know, aliens. So we need to filter. Nobody talks about internet when you're talking about e-commerce or about WhatsApp. Yeah. ChatGPT, that's a very good example. AI, it's getting broader adopted than blockchain because it uses a human language. You can interact with a powerful machine, but you don't know because language is natural to you. So you just prompt the proper thing and you get amazing results. That's very easy to interact. And so, as you say, we won't talk about UX because that's evidently the main problem. But if you create incentives to overcome that difficulty, you will do it. So by providing purpose to what you're doing, you will make people engage. I mean, with us, you need to download MetaMask in your computer 5 years ago. You know, that's love. People also made a master just to put 20 euros. And another example I would put, when my daughter was learning to play these Axie Infinity little things, she didn't want to hear anything about wallets and that. But the moment she wanted to play, she forgot about all the difficulties to go through. So we need to set a very attractive goal for the entities, the institutions, anyone to overcome the difficulty of the technological barrier to come to a result. And we have to evolve our narrative or language to explain what we do now that it's easier to tell something and say, it's with Web3, and you don't have to explain Web3 as 5 years ago.
I agree, that's great. But I still want to go into something we talked about yesterday, that you say like most of the farmers you work with, they don't have a phone, they don't have access to internet, and still you manage to like make them part of the process and distribute funds. And maybe you can just tell us like how are you doing this, like probably also with the incentives, so kind of you explained this, but maybe you can get a bit deeper into that.
Yes, the first 2 years we went to live to Mexico, where most of our operations are. We are already in 6 countries in Latin America. So we start working with small groups of farmers, and we asked them to name one representative who would come over to the city, 3 hours drive and more walking, and we would give them our computers to access their wallet. Not scalable, but we learn a lot. So when we grow and we have 300 families, we organize a cooperative, and then this legal entity has one legal representative who had access to a bank account and who has access to the wallet from our smart contract. So she gets the funds, converts them to the local currency, and distributes it. And when they pay back, it's the same way on the other side. And on the other way, that's the strongest part of our protocol, this crowd collateral. They are very good payers, but people doesn't know. So we have to provide comfort to that, and we created what is known as blended finance. So a lot of people put the collateral, that's our token, to provide comfort to the lenders, because default is less than 1%. The people doesn't know that global default is less than 3%. They put together smallholder farmers with microfinance. Microfinance quite often is for consumption, so default is very high. But people doesn't know they are good payers, so we provide this comfort. And also, at the beginning, we ask them, the cooperative, to buy tokens and stake them and say, forget about it. Just give me 20% of the collateral and we do this all for you. It's a learning process because we are very enthusiastic about being decentralized, but at the beginning you have to set the lines in order to make the road easier for everyone.
So interesting to hear. I feel like it's great. Everybody can learn so much from Ethic Hub. It's so great. So John, like at the Refi DAO meetups, like you already said, like most people are not even from the ecosystem, and I think like you're making a really great case and like addressing that like Refi is actually something that is very interesting to people from outside of Web3, and like how are you like advertising your events, or how are you getting people there, and like where do you feel like that people are still missing, maybe that you would like to see, where you don't know how to get them to your meetups?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we have a strategy of just meeting regularly, same time every month. Third Thursday, we hang out. We choose different community locations, different parts of the city to attract different demographics. You know, nonprofit, impact hub, startup hub, you know, close to local government, and who you bring on stage often has a big impact on who shows up. They often bring their community. And I think one of the cool things we experimented with during the last Gitcoin round was this idea of like a coordination game where we had many cities at the same time hosting Gitcoin activation stations to get people set up for the first time with a crypto wallet and try and mint a Gitcoin passport, which sounded great in theory, but actually like the way the mechanism is designed is like, unless you're crypto native, you can't really get a high enough score to get match funding, which sucks. But the cool thing is actually watching total new people engage with this technology and seeing how genuinely confusing it is and how hard it is. And you might be, you know, discouraged by this, but actually this is where community comes in. Because if you can help people through hard experiences and make them feel like they've done something difficult and achieved some sort of meaningful outcome at the end, and they've made a relationship with somebody else alongside, they feel a part of a community. So I think this can actually be a real superpower of Web3 of saying, hey, if you're not tech savvy, it's totally cool. Just show up, mint a wallet, maybe you can give $5 from a partner, and then you can engage with our protocol. And that's why I love what Ethic Hub has done around gathering farmers and representatives from these communities to, you know, a table, share food, and watch them engage with this tech and build a human relationship through the technical hurdles that still exist. And I think for us, there's so many different people that we're not able to reach. And so we're going to actually just go out into the city and reach them, doing little pop-up hubs and just feeding people in the streets, saying, hey, like, there's so much abundance in this space, economic prosperity, like we've got more than enough to go around. And I think the idea of giving freely of time, of food, of drinks, of energy, of attention to people who have genuine need, and then helping them find their way into the ecosystem, connecting with whatever resonates with their values, is a really powerful path. And it looks very different in Lisbon than it does in Medellin, or than it does in Sao Paulo. And we're just trying to embrace that diversity all around the world and share and propagate those learnings of what's working to onboard the next generation of talent and capital into this movement.
Amazing. You're doing really amazing job. Thank you. So I have very quick question for you, because then we're going to start with questions from the audience. So just to like tell us, can you tell us more about, it's like we talked about accessibility for communities. I think voluntary carbon market is like a great example of, we said there's more than carbon markets, but like let's use that as an example for something huge with a lot of different stakeholders. And where do you see like current as accessibility issues that we have? Can you just sum up in 1 minute?
Absolutely. I already did my riff on the VCM, so I won't say much more. Other than the fact that whether it's the traditional VCM or any new type of tokenized credit that we create, there's still a massive, massive opportunity and misunderstanding about the standards that are applied to these various environmental assets, and not just within the VCM, even in the renewable energy markets with renewable energy credits or RECs, and obviously within the carbon market space, the ambiguity and some of the opacity associated with the standards and the methodologies that people are trying to adhere to create these credits causes a lot of confusion. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there in the traditional markets as well as in the Web3 carbon markets, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. Just for everybody who doesn't know about standards in the carbon market, there's like big standards like Vera and Gold Standard, and it's very hard to access them as a small project. And then a lot of smaller projects see Web3 as like a way to tokenize their carbon credits, but then these credits are not as valuable as they don't like reach these methodologies or standards. But now we're going to move on to the audience questions, and I'm going to start with the first one. Aren't inclusivity and refi also band-aids until a fundamental political shift in governance and incentives happens? Who wants to take?
I think I'll take on that. So to some extent, yes. And I think this is where, I spent 3.5 years building software for city and state governments in the US. And there is an incredible lever at a political level to enact change. A specific example was a friend of mine had 7 other volunteers, $200,000 of donations, and in 2 years, they got the New York City government to ban natural gas in all new buildings from 2025 and onwards. It's a 20 megaton per year reduction in emissions because they replaced it by law with renewable alternatives. If you look at that from a credit issuance standpoint, those are some incredibly impactful and valuable credits. So yes, these political levers are significantly important to initiate. But the reality is most politicians don't see a viable economic model to shift capital to a regenerative principle. So these experiments are essential to pave the way and say, look, this is working on the ground with coffee farmers in Mexico. Look, this is working on the ground with a regenerative farm in Alentejo outside of Lisbon. Come visit. Come taste and see. It's not only profitable, but it's economic, it's social, it's ecological. And therefore, you can feel confident as an elected official pushing towards this agenda because you know it's going to work. So I think they go hand in hand, part and parcel. Innovation has to lead the way, but then we have to invite those government officials, knowing what their constituent base needs, to make the switch, because it's easy for them at that point.
Okay. Do you also want to answer? Because otherwise I would just like add the next question and then you can answer both. Because like
Sure.
The next fitting question would be like how to involve the government without turning it into a centralized model. Maybe you can
Yeah, very, very similar, I guess you could say. The only thing I was going to say and maybe add on to what John was saying is that government policies are always lagging, and they need those bottom-up solutions to inform them of what an appropriate top-down policy measure is. And many times, even after they create that top-down policy measure, they still need some bottom-up solutions to help them enforce and monitor those top-down solutions. So there is this great symbiosis between the top-down policy or governance systems and the bottom-up innovative solutions, and that's where there's an amazing opportunity to bring those two together.